Boom, what is up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. We have a very exciting show. It's our first time talking about time banking. And who better to have on the show than Dr. Edgar Cahn Anitha Beberg. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. And okay, this is awesome because we kind of have like the old school founder of time bankings, you know, the original, and then we have Seva Exchange, which is now taking time banking to this new level. And I really like how we're going to have that conversation tonight. Okay, so let's go with like a 101 intro. You know, time banking is very kind of like, you know, one hour, one credit. So let's unpack that a bit, you know, when the term initially came to be and what that really meant.
Well, time banking was a way of creating a new kind of money. This was before all the cryptocurrencies, as a way of really saying that volunteering was more than volunteering, that there was a whole economy that underlay all that money does. It's called families, neighborhoods, kinship groups, communities, civil society. And all it does is minor things like raise children, take care of the elderly, make democracy work, and keep the planet sustainable, but nothing important, you understand. And so when Anitha undertook to say, let's take this to the next level, she was really talking about unleashing a resource and a source of labor that involved every human being, because one of the core principles underlying time banking is that all of us have something to give, something to do that others need. And if we're going to create the kind of world that we want, that's not for a few people doing the work. That's all of us helping to build the village it takes to raise the child. You've got to build and maintain that village. So
well,
why don't you take
I always say it takes, and you always use that when I'm talking about Seva Exchange, it's not only takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to have a person thrive in this world, to have someone back you up. Yeah. So, I mean, there is a lot of talk right now on social issues about like universal basic income. And all along, I have actually, if you look at some articles I've written about universal basic income, that it's not just, if you just throw money to people, some people think, yes, that's the way to solve the problem. But I think what fundamentally we should do is look within ourselves to help ourselves as well as our own community. And that doesn't cost money. So.
And that was, that was what I had to really teach the London School of Economics, because I had to do the thinking that says, how can you have a currency that eliminates, that rejects market price? Because in economics, if marginal benefit does not exceed marginal cost, nothing can survive. What that means is you got to get more than you put in order to keep doing it. But the marginal benefit that she's talking about, that I identified at the London School of Economics, was how we feel about ourselves and how other people look at us. And so there was always volunteering, but when volunteers get recognized, and when what they do in effect enables them to get help for themselves, or to use the credits they earn to give to a nonprofit or to give some to somebody else who may need it, then you get a multiplier effect, and it's that multiplier effect that convinced them that I had found a way for marginal benefit to exceed marginal cost.
Yes. Okay, so there's so much to unpack.
I know. I was going to
let's start with this.
Okay.
You were talking about work with London School of Economics. There's also been, besides TimeBanks USA, you've also done a tremendous amount of work. It was the National Legal Services Program to end the war on poverty. Co-founded that, co-founded the Antioch School of Law, and that's at the University of the District of Columbia. So there's been a tremendous amount of work that you've been doing across other organizations for the last 40 years, has it been, of this?
At least, yeah.
At least.
Edgar has walked the talk. His whole life has been, service to others.
Yes.
I'm proud of him. He actually changed the course of history. If anyone, in terms of law students, anyone who's a law student now or has ever, gone to law school, he created the law clinics that you actually have to go out there and, do it first before you just study about it in theory to become a lawyer. He can go about that.
Well, it was my legacy because my father taught me that justice was too great an abstraction, but and platonic, but that we were all born with a sense of injustice, with an ability to respond to disparities that we should not tolerate. So the definition of justice he gave me was the process of either preventing or remedying whatever would trigger our sense of injustice. And for me, time banking is a way of addressing the disparities, the fundamental disparities that should not be tolerated and that we do not need to accept.
Perfect entry into what the next part of what I wanted to touch on was, which is you both started speaking on in terms of kind of society and of community and of the way that we've evolved. And there's the way that we evolved with money hasn't been recognizing the way that we as communities function in terms of raising children, taking care of elderly, volunteer work,
The whole civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Okay, so now...
That's all.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that a good way to maybe address this would be the way that you started. Edgar, you mentioned this to me when you walked in really quickly, and it definitely expanded my awareness. It was really important that technology has built trust, because if we were to have met 1,000, 2,000 years ago, it would have been easy for us, even a couple hundred years ago, to just kind of bop ourselves over the head, take your goods, and that's it. There's no footprint. There's no paper trail of you or paper trail of me, really. Now there's the social network graph. If I'm not on social networks for a week, or if I'm not on texting or calling for a week, people already know that, and they know where I am at and all this other kind of stuff. So now it's become different. So maybe we touch on how we went with community to now with technology and where we're going with where we need to be.
If I had to use a paper card index to find out who is available Tuesday night to babysit or help my kid with homework, I'd be going through index cards. So the whole digital revolution that the internet, that first the computers made possible, and then that the internet has made accessible on smartphones, enables us to radically reduce the time it takes to build trust and to build and to see what the footprints are. If a person has done something bad, they leave footprints. If they don't show up, if they're late, that becomes part of their track record. And so that made it possible to begin to trust strangers at a rate that exceeded anything that history permitted.
That's so fascinating.
Well, blockchain is all about that, right? Immutable trust.
Yes.
And I mean, we are using that. Traditionally, our TimeBanks communities were closed communities. They would trade within their own exchange within themselves. We want to use blockchain and then open it up to the world. So now you have one global community trading within each other. They can still have closed, I don't want to say systems, but that's what they are. Closed systems like a school. Like in my case, I'm a mom at a parent participation school. We have to volunteer, a certain number of hours every week, but they can't have outsiders necessarily volunteer because we have innumerable, we have to have TB shots, background checks, and we don't want a stranger coming in to, just teach our child, whatever that we have to do. So there's some security things, but I mean, that's why we have two systems. We want to keep the traditional TimeBank system where it can be closed for those that need to have it that way, especially if it's for informal health care. If you want someone driving a patient, again, you have to check their driver's license record. But then for other things, because there's different types of volunteering, you don't need to have all of those extensive background checks just to show up at an event, at a campaign event. So we have different levels of trust. And that's why a blockchain is going to help us with that, having two different systems. And with time banking, we've always had the time credit. So every Each hour you volunteer is equivalent to 1 time credit, which you can then redeem for an hour of service for yourself. So we're not changing that part. We want to keep that because we already have communities all over the world, and we don't want to just pull the rug out of them. But now we're introducing crypto, and with crypto, what we're going to do is now people have the option. Let's say I've accumulated 50 time credits and I don't need 50 hours for myself. Sure, maybe 1 or 2 I can keep, but let's say this many hours I don't need. I can use that now, convert them into Seva coins. By the way, Seva means volunteer in Sanskrit. So it's a Seva exchange, volunteer exchange. So now what I can do is I can donate those hours that I volunteered to an institution of my choosing. It could be back to the school, it could be to my church, it could be to Habitat for Humanity. So we're doubling the impact of volunteerism. So the people who say, well, you know, the whole point of volunteering is just to give your time, well then fine, don't redeem your credits, just donate them to someone else who really could use that time. So that's, you know, the only criticism I get is that, say, but volunteer is about just giving of yourself. So go ahead and do that. But there's others who really do have needs.
You're really reinventing volunteerism. As you're speaking, I'm totally seeing it. And you made it clear there's usually silos for volunteering.
And those are vertical.
And those are vertical.
And they're under the auspices of a professionally dominated, maybe nonprofit or government agency. And she's creating a whole horizontal flow.
Yes. And this makes it easy, like you said, okay, I've accumulated time credits, now I want to donate them to my whatever entities I want. Also to do things like take time credits from different places, move them around, take volunteers, depending on, like you were saying earlier as well, if there needs to be significant background check on the volunteer because it has to do with children or has to do with something very important, then yes, then check. But otherwise, sometimes it's, you know, feeding some people or, and then that might not require the extensive. So it might be easier to get a volunteer for that position. Okay, so that ecosystem is actually huge.
So I explained the blockchain part, right? I explained the time credits. Now I want to talk about the AI component.
Okay, but before we get to the AI component, which is important, and we will address that, there's a very important philosophical question to ask along the way. That question is, time banking is built on the idea that my 1 hour of helping you write your book is, as a volunteer, is equivalent to the person that spent an hour making a chair, and so these sort of ideas. Now, is it possible that someone that volunteered writing code for a company, that hour or that credit is worth more than if I just, you know, put soup into a bowl or something?
This is why I wanted to talk about AI. So what we're doing is we're not saying to someone, hey, a lot of people say, I'm a lawyer, my time is worth more than a cook, okay? But that's not what we're doing. With our algorithmic skills matching, you know, we can show our product slide, you know, a person creates their profile, they list the skills they want to volunteer for. If you're a lawyer and you're not going to, if you don't want to give your an hour of law service, but hey, I actually like to paint murals, you know, I would love to do that for someone, that's my hobby, then volunteer that. So we're going to match the skills that a volunteer wants to give, right, with the critical needs of a person.
But there's another frame to respond to you. Let me give two ways of talking about that. My slice of eternity is not worth more than your slice of eternity.
Yes, so that's okay. So that principle is what we're building this conversation on.
Well,
so me writing computer code, even though the market might value it as $200 an hour or something, that, you know, ladling.
But we're talking about volunteer time, not professional time.
Okay, but think of
it's a skill set that is much more in demand than someone putting a.
And think of what it meant to reject market price, market value. Market value is dependent on supply and demand. So if it's scarce, if it's rare, it's very valuable. If it's more abundant, it's cheaper. If it's really abundant, it's dirt cheap or worthless. And I suddenly realized that meant being a human being was worthless. all of the capacities
But
that
there's
enable...
only 7.5 billion human beings, so it's not technically infinitely abundant like air is. Or,
It's all the time they have and all the time future generations will have if we preserve the planet and keep it sustainable. And all of that, of that time is in fact of infinite, is priceless. Yeah. And what we've said is that...
Interesting, so time is priceless.
Yeah, that to devalue our fundamental capacities to listen to each other, to care for each other, to come to each other's rescue, to stand up for what's right, to mobilize, to preserve the planet, all of that time is priceless. We didn't pay minimum wage for demonstrations to stop the Vietnam War or to fight segregation or to change apartheid.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. That was not a minimum wage job.
That was people going out in the thousands, tens of thousands to oppose certain parental value systems.
Giving a chunk of their life.
Yeah. Their time.
To give a chunk of their life and their time to change the direction of humanity.
And that's priceless. And that's when you look back at your life, you ask yourself, what have I done and how have I and why am I here and how do I justify the time that I've spent? And if it's all about selling and buying at market values, I have in fact devalued what it meant to be a human being.
Wow, okay, this is very profound and we need to cover it for just a little longer. So, holy cow. Okay, so if you look at, this is really,
holy cow is probably
right.
literal, yeah.
Hey, I'm Hindu. I agree with that. It's always holy cow.
So time being priceless. So my slice of eternity that I live in here, right, this moment is no more or less valuable than anyone else's moment. And then that same 80 years, my 80 years, no more or less valuable than someone else's. So that first principle, and then this a second sort of principle is this.
We're revaluing what we honor as work. The third is there's a pay it forward reciprocity when we talk about the core values built into the, we're changing the operating system that undergirds the whole money system.
Because nothing would have happened for the civil rights or the fight against war or whatever. It wouldn't have occurred if people were like, I need to get paid a minimum wage to go and do.
Right.
How about your children who raised you to go and teach you the values to go out there, right? What about the mom who spent all those hours? I know personal experience. So many times moms have to give so much of our time and for the detriment of our career. And I'm actually going to be addressing that in our app. So now what we can do is you go and volunteer, you'll be given a positive review for every hour you do. I mean, if you have a positive review. And now we can take all of those, let's say I volunteer 100 hours, I have 100 positive reviews, I can launch my career in something I'm passionate about. And I'm not ruining my career to volunteer.
See, with the Seva coin, she's really adding a whole new dimension. But you see, when you change the characteristics of a medium of exchange, you change the dynamics. Think of a grading system as a currency. When you change from pass-fail to 4.0, you change the whole dynamics in a classroom.
Yes.
When you give community service credits, in other words, the way in which we design the medium of exchange we use to recognize work, to value work, and to create the ability to define yourself by what you've done and what you've earned, that medium of exchange sends out a whole new dynamic because of the changes. And so she's changing the characteristics of how we use time and how we value time.
Okay, this is starting to just eke into me more and more.
Might be here all night.
This notion of money. We didn't evolve without any other. We haven't tried other systems. The first thing that people come to mind is trying to bash communism or socialism. That seems to be the first thing. And then there's never a conversation, rarely a conversation about, oh, well, what new system could we try that and that's kind of what this conversation's about is, what is time banking? How can it potentially be a new system that enables us with things like potentially universal basic income and all this kind of stuff? Now I want to pull up TimeBanks' website because you guys, this is really important to showcase as well as we get to some of the Seva Exchange stuff. So Ron, you see the TimeBanks? You got it over there?
Right there.
Yeah, cool. So, all right. One of the first things that I saw here that I thought was really important to highlight was these 5 core values of time banking. So, okay, 1980, Edgar Cahn dreamed up a new kind of money. Money would have no price. Every hour would count the same, 1 hour, 1 hour. Okay. And then we talked about social justice and how this really enabled people to go and they didn't get paid minimum wage. They just went and invested their time into changing the path of civilization. So no more throwaway people. And you've authored how many books now?
Well, at least 3, and then all kinds of articles and law reviews and magazines. And the latest one is in a Jewish spiritual magazine, Tikkun, on how we really need to redefine value and how allowing money to be the dominant and exclusive way in which we talk cost benefit and risk analysis really imprisons us in a way of determining what's possible.
Yes, it imprisons us, and it doesn't enable our creativity to expand out of what exists outside of the system that we haven't yet tried. Okay, so the no more throwaway people is very interestingly analogous to the war on normal people.
Yes.
He did take it from.
It's very interestingly right there.
And I don't think we'll get to his vision unless of universal income until we begin to understand that people have an obligation to give to pay it forward. We all inherited what past generations have done.
Built the electricity, the internet, the food, ubiquity in water,
And so, and the village that it takes won't exist if we don't all put in labor.
Keep paying it forward,
And so when it is recognized and validated that every human being can contribute something needed by somebody else.
Yes.
A 5th grader can help a 3rd grader learn the alphabet. Juveniles can run a youth court that radically reduces recidivism. Seniors can help other seniors stay out of a nursing home. But grandparents can also help raise grandchildren if the parents are working or if the family is in some way dysfunctional. So we need to create relationships and networks of trust, and that's what Seva is really undertaking to do, and that's why it's got the name it does.
Yeah.
Okay, there was.
So we're talking about something both very new, but we couldn't have done it in the caves. What we found out was that if we didn't begin to help each other, when the mate got killed, if somebody else didn't look after the kids. So really in our DNA is looking out for each other and thinking about who's going to take care of the future generations, and is there going to be a world for the future generations?
So
we're going back to cave person.
A lot of the evolutionary pressures that brought us here today were at times very violent ones, and I think we're moving in a direction, like you said, of transcending that and moving towards a time of figuring out how to care for things like the hours that people spend on child raising, on community work, on that kind of stuff. So the 5 core values: asset, every one of us has something of value to share with someone else. Yep. Redefining work, there are some forms of work that money will not easily pay for, like building strong families, revitalizing neighborhoods, making democracy work, advancing social justice. Time credits were designed to reward, recognize, and honor that work. You could spend weeks and months of your time making no money but progressing social norms to advance and progress. And so this is really important. And
as she says, the old system, what I'll call the old operating system, devalued particularly those kinds of work, and particularly the work of women, of immigrants, of children, of elderly. And that's why we need to honor that as real work. We need to validate it. We need to upgrade our perception of it. But then there's a pay it forward piece. If I help you, I feel good. But how do you feel? Well, you feel grateful. But if all you if the only way you can define yourself as somebody in need of help, you don't have any way of feeling as good as I feel. So built into this is the notion that when you receive help, the way in which you pay back is to show that you're as capable of giving help and you have capacity to help others. So we are equal. You are not subordinate. I am grateful to you for accepting the help I can give, and the way in which you can pay me back is to show that you have the same ability, so that every act sends in motion the ripples in a pond that happens when you throw a pebble in a pond.
And this is what you were mentioning earlier with the youth, when you have a child that just needs a tiny bit of guidance to help them avoid violence and gangs, but rather focus on art or music or sport, that is a tiny little shift that pay it forward from a high schooler to a younger middle schooler or elementary school kid, or from a mentor to a student of any sort. That is so important.
It already exists, but we want to be able to connect all the dots and make it a formal ecosystem.
See, acts of volunteering get forgotten, they get evaporated. What she's doing is taking that volunteering and giving it a digital life that enables it to continue to exist and have force.
Yes, and the digital world is, like we were talking about earlier with footprints and the tech building trust, is now the digital world is enabling time banking to really flourish at a much, you don't have to go through the old, when you're looking for a babysitter, you gotta look at all those different cards, who's available, call the people.
And that's why the social networks is a core value, because what it is explicit is, we had a whole ethos of everybody for themselves, and you got to prove yourselves and pick yourselves up by your own bootstraps. Well, I came into this earth 9 months in debt, and so I got some pay it forward propositions.
9 months in debt?
Yeah, when you're a baby, right? 9 months.
9 months in.
You're in the womb.
Mother,
in the womb, So you're 9 months in hock when you come out.
I don't know. I don't know about
Wait, but how is that? Wait, but how is that debt?
Well, we all have an obligation, I think, to take care of the next generation.
I didn't sign up for this. I don't know. I don't owe anybody a dime. I want $500 just to get out of bed in the morning.
Okay.
Yes. So that's an interesting counter to that. Is we have to all be born. All 7.5 billion of us have to agree that that I have an obligation, 9 months in debt when I'm born, that I'm gonna have to pay it forward, because I was.
And the labor of mothering and the labor of raising a child has all been forgotten. Has all been.
Trust me, I know everything.
You're basically born into a shelter, almost always. You're born into water and food and electricity, almost always now. We're getting there. And so because of that, you are technically then in gratitude, you want to give back, you want to pay it forward for the next generations by building. And so that's okay. So we went reciprocity, social networks, and respect. This was actually really interesting because I recently learned this. We're hosting a Women in Alliance event tomorrow night, and we're featuring very powerful women to have discussion about what's going to be happening in this transition as we have women coming into power, and it's amazing. I have this point that I was taught about respect, which is that that we actually don't want to be loved, we want to be respected. And I thought that was very interesting because I totally feel that now more than ever, especially with women. And now I'm trying to take that also into into elderly and into parents and into children.
Showing respect as a form of love.
As a form of love.
It is a form of love.
Yes. Yes.
But it's also critical. Respect means a feedback loop. You have to be open to hearing what other people think, are saying, or hurting, even if you don't want to. So without a feedback, respect really says we have to build into the systems we have the voice of the people whom we're helping, who may tell us what you're doing doesn't make sense. We need that as a corrective built in.
Yeah.
And that's why that had to be added to the core values.
Yes. These are really strong core values, and this is just timebanks.org, everyone. The link's in the bio. Go check it out. Really easy to find a time bank near you or start one, and really get rolling into understanding what this is like and where it's going in the future. And then we also have another link in the bio, which is gatheringwithapurpose.net. And why don't we go speak about this as we continue talking about Seva?
So anyone who's interested in time banking, we really want people to first actually go to this site, because we're offering materials that they can try out. I mean, instead of just joining a time banking community and then saying, whoa, this is not for me, and quitting, start your own with a few friends. That's why it's called Gathering with a Purpose. And Edgar's wife...
Because the threshold investment you have to make to build a nonprofit can be a barrier. Yeah. But my wife, Chris, created Gathering with a Purpose, because to pull 5 or 6 or 15 people together and to have them exchange, and then to have them go through a process of subsequent workshops and begin to learn about time banking, and then say, maybe we'll do this, maybe we won't. But it's a much lower threshold of entry into the ideas and the values.
That's really important. Yeah.
Actually, we're actually trying to raise funds to do a film on Gathering with a Purpose, where we will follow maybe 5 or 6 people in DC, because that's where they're from, where at all walks of life. It doesn't matter, and then we bring them together and follow them for a few weeks, as Chris will teach the course, and then wait a month and then follow them and say, how do you feel about time banking? Is this something for you? And we want it to be raw, we're not forcing them to say, yeah, we're gonna do it. But it's a good way that it's like a peek at this is what it is, because people don't, it sounds great to everyone, but it really isn't necessarily for everyone. We hope it is, but.
I wish we could spend a lot more time talking about, about the way that capitalism dances with time banking. I wish we could pass more time on that.
Okay.
Would capitalism dancing with time banking? What are you saying there?
let's
Summarize a little bit. I know you don't want to spend too much time.
I have one thing to say about that.
Yeah.
So what we're doing with the crypto component is we're partnering with a company called Manabase that's offering universal basic income. We're partnering with another company that's trying to offer, starting with simple insurance, travel, health, anything. I mean, eventually it'll be larger things. And they're using through coins. We're partnering with another company who's doing affordable housing. So what you can do now is by volunteering, you earn our coins. You cannot buy our coins. You have to earn them, or it's, you can donate them. You could buy it to donate. But now once you've earned them, you can go on and trade that coin for universal basic income, anything, affordable housing, anything that you would think that the government maybe should offer. That's how we're using capitalism to,
That's the dance.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, so I go and volunteer my time, and I earn a Seva coin, and then I can take Seva coin and get whatever basic needs that I need to live, and even past that, whatever is being offered by other companies. So then those other companies are then taking the Seva coin, and then how do they continue their operations? How do they grow and with taking Seva coin?
We want to build the largest volunteer exchange network. So for them, it's also, people it's more exposure for them as well. So, because we already have communities, we have them globally. So for them at this stage in their thing, they need to, educate more and more people about other things like universal basic income. So, I mean, it's a mutual thing. We want to help the world.
Well, how would they sustain? Okay, if I have 10 people that work on a project that I take Seva coins to provide the product for people through Seva coin, how do I cover the living expenses of the 10 people that work at the company if I accept Seva coin?
I think you should interview them next. They'll tell you the details. But they are offering to about 100,000 people their own coins.
Are you talking about Mana coin?
Mana coins.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is not dollars. They're not giving universal basic income in fiat currency.
Okay. We are going to be living, as we have now, in two worlds, the world of money and the world of non-money. I didn't invent the world of non-money. It's been around from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And so, but the question is how we keep that world vital, how we enable it to grow. If you had to pay for everything your parents did, you'd be in trouble.
Oh yeah, you'd be in a lot of debt.
Yeah, and particularly if even at minimum wage, right? And so
that's a good quote. If you had to pay for everything your parents did,
yeah.
That's a good one. Because
like
0
that.
to 18, you did nothing pretty much. You went to school and that kind of stuff, but they provided everything for you. Yeah.
See, so capitalism looks at what money can do. We're looking at what money doesn't do, and we're trying to say that the economic value, the significance of that, cannot be underestimated anymore. That even for capitalism to thrive, it needs vibrant communities, it means trust, it means children who grow up with something weird called the work ethic, and principles of you honor your promises and you do what, and you don't break rules and you don't hurt other people. So you need any economic system needs a moral order and an ecosystem that nurtures the growth and reinforcement of that. What we're talking about with Seva is a medium of exchange that can reinforce that and can combine it with both intrinsic rewards, how you feel about yourself, how you recognize, and extrinsic reward, how you get discounts, how you get bargains, how you get access to events. Those two can live side by side the way the nonprofit world has always lived.
Can you break that down for us? How can those two, give us examples?
I can tell you this. We have, our intrinsic rewards obviously is always there when you volunteer. I feel good, right? The extrinsic rewards can be the Seva coins, the credits. It also could be like gamification. Wow, I can earn a whole bunch of these credits. To certain people, that means something.
But look at loan forgiveness for student loans. That community service can give loan forgiveness, and you could earn loan forgiveness. And what you get is a more educated person who can give back the expertise that they've developed in return for use of that money. We need to experiment with new ways in which those two systems can live side by side.
Totally. Let's experiment and let's figure out. Absolutely. What are the new creative ways of thinking that have yet to be?
Habitat for Humanity does it, and Seva will open it up to a whole other scale.
So here's a question. So we have someone that is getting intrinsically rewarded for doing volunteer work, then they get an extrinsic reward, they get a Seva coin, and they can spend it where they want. Okay, so those are the intrinsic, extrinsic.
With the AI, we're also doing impactful thing. That's another motivation. Previously, if you volunteer, maybe it's not, you're just asked, hey, we just need 100 people to come to this event, maybe you could just sign people in. But now we're actually, imagine this, in my case, I actually teach ceramics.
The AI is going to make everything so much easier.
But we're creating impact. When I can even make the case for myself, and this might be extreme. Okay, I love to teach ceramics to children. But now I have suddenly been matched to a child who, maybe that person has cancer, and their last wish is to make something for their mom, and they just, that's the last wish. And I get matched to that? Damn, that's a big impact, isn't it? It's not just, I'm just making pottery.
That's actually one of the biggest impacts on that person's life.
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. We're creating impact through AI, and we're using technology to advance all of the things that we couldn't necessarily do because of bureaucracy. We're gonna, we don't need to worry about it anymore.
So the story that you gave, there are, trillions of these types of stories, and so to fill the right invented volunteer network into the proper position that needs to be of one of these trillions of scenarios, that's crucial, and to have algorithms that enable that at more effective rates, and that's amazing. There's still something about this that I wanted to press afterward, which was that when I have an intrinsic and an extrinsic reward, intrinsic being feeling amazing, extrinsic being a Seva coin, I can also look at maybe a capitalism option, which is I build a product or service that enables me to feel like, okay, I've built something and that makes me feel love. Other people get it, they pay coin or money or whatever it is for it, then they feel love. I'm just trying to put these into a mixing pot and see how it flourishes.
Then you need to look at cooperative economics and co-ops.
Okay.
Because those are a combination of labor and investment, but they also have money. But if you're a member of a co-op, you get certain discounts, and
that's right.
And so we're not the first to try and understand that sweat equity ought to give you some returns.
Some returns.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the sweat equity is also evident in the Silicon Valley entrepreneur structure as well. People getting sweat equity for joining companies and stuff like that. Okay, so now I think you mentioning co-ops I think has helped make some more sense. Thank you, Ron. I'll flip over our little 15-minute timer. So there's still so much more to understand about how these things can evolve together. I'm extremely open-minded on the show and always trying to unpack really high-quality nuance around what the evolution of this would look like and how people can explore it and understand it. And so it's really tough to get what it is.
It's a lot.
Seva would provide the digital path, but supposing every government grant and contract required in-kind match in citizen participation hours using Seva to monitor those and document them. That would mean that all the nonprofits were not only service providers, but they became catalysts, or they partnered with Seva organizations or TimeBanks to mobilize. Think what a transformative impact that would have on every attempt to invest in addressing some kind of social problem. It would be massive, and there's no limit, because we're spending billions, but what's the return on those billions? And if the return were billions of hours documented, then the nonprofits themselves would have a stronger case to go back for funding. And the programs that they care about would have a people-based constituency to tell their congressman, you better keep funding that nonprofit because I'm partnering with them to produce the kinds of social good that you want to produce. And
this is a massive market. Can you pull up the slide that has the market on it? That slide number is 140 billion?
410
$410 billion for
that's just the U.S.
That's the tech, which we talked about the tech a little bit with the blockchain ledger.
So this is just in the U.S.
This is just in the U.S.
Last year in 2000.
Do we know how many volunteers that is? Is that millions of volunteers?
We have 63 million volunteers, and they think it's about 1 in 4 people in the U.S. 1 in 4. They're saying volunteer, and that's about 8 billion hours per year in the U.S. So it's a lot of hours, 8 billion hours.
That's a lot.
In Wales, the Minister of Health changed all grants and contracts had to have match in creating some kind of informal network of the patients and the families in the community had to create those networks. And they used time banking to do, many of them used time banking to do that, others use other means. But the notion that the money that we spend to solve problems ought to have a multiplier effect, could function as a catalyst if you had a currency that honored that work and documented it, and enabled you to channel it, track it, and focus it.
Yes, and that's where we're heading. Okay. Now let's talk about a little bit more on the future side of things, because time's coming to close. I want to make sure we talk about this. So it seems as though evolution went from the small tribal and communal gangs that we were able to just more simply do what we wanted to do and get it done, to now with 7.5 billion people, it makes it more difficult for us to figure out how to value things, the tougher things to value that markets aren't valuing right now. So with the future, as we progress into things like exploring universal basic income, exploring this massive reinvented volunteer network and algorithms that can pair people up, blockchain technology that enables all of this, where are we headed then with the different tech stacks that we have that are making this happen? And universal basic income, if I get $1,000 a month, am I going to spend more time, creating things as well as going and volunteering? How do we see that playing?
Well, do you want to answer? Okay, for me, I would say, we've always been able to give, we already give volunteer time, but now we want to motivate more people to recruit everyone. Everyone gives time to a buddy, helps somebody out, but we want to, we want to acknowledge that in our system and give you something for it.
Well,
that you can then, get what
when you help
saying.
your buddy move, or you help,
all of those hours count. We don't even think about that.
Yeah, but when you hold the door open for like 10 seconds, that doesn't.
It's an hour. It's an hour.
Yeah,
so if you hold it for an hour, okay, we'll give you an hour credit.
So these are very interesting. It's like, how do you define what, how many minutes or whatever, and how, and that kind of, how do you define as something as a volunteer credit?
Well, that's why we want to keep the time banking communities. We have, someone who is a time banking coordinator. So that person in the time banking community, they can, verify the exchange, or they can, first of all, they can verify. With blockchain, we don't need it, but that's what was happening. That the time banking coordinator could, if the exchange wasn't happening and somebody needed something and it wasn't being matched manually, the time bank coordinator stepped in and said, "Oh, I know someone who can help you," and they would do the calls. So we're not trying to get rid of the time bank coordinator. We think that role is very, very important, especially now we're going to be expanding to nonprofits, and there should be a role, and that's called the volunteer manager, and they will be able to verify some of these credits. It's not, but we understand there's two systems. Okay, again, there's going to be a time banking system, and I wanted to explain this because it's very confusing to people. But if nonprofits are willing to use our system, they can get more volunteers, and then retain their volunteers. But now what they're going to do is offer to their volunteers another system saying, hey, all the volunteers, let's say at the YMCA, we're letting you use our platform to exchange time with your own community. You're with each other. You all belong to the YMCA. Let's exchange time with each other. So you come give us some time at the YMCA and volunteer at our nonprofit, but we're also offering you a way to get your credits back and for yourself. So in that case, the volunteer manager will verify that yes, this person actually came to our campaign event and helped out maybe with a blood drive or whatever it is, and then you'll verify that. And time bank communities, what is it called? The time bank coordinator is the one who verified it.
Now think of veterans benefits. You've heard of. Yeah. And veterans, for their service, get mortgages, get discounts, get access to higher education, got the GI Bill. So if you take it from veterans to persons who provide service to community via time banking, think of what the implications of that could be. If they could earn access to student loans, if they could earn access to mortgages at lower interest rates, if they could earn loan forgiveness, if they could enable their kids to get into colleges that otherwise they couldn't afford. The implications of this are open-ended because a currency will drive, as money drives the creation of multiple systems, a new medium of exchange will drive many, many systems. We've already seen it drive a system for people coming out of prison who wake up in the morning to provide safe passage across gang territory, for kids to go to school, come back from school. And that was short-lived, but it was very effective while it lasted. So we need to get people understanding, we need to get philanthropy to understand that investing in this kind of endeavor, because you need an infrastructure and the nonprofits need to survive, but we need to change the framework from what I'll call the unilateral delivery of service to partnerships with TimeBanks and Seva will provide us with a new level of that makes time banking even more attractive, I think, because it will have Seva coins that will expand its
volunteer pool. You're going to be trading not just within a smaller community. You could trade with the world. You could go on a vacation and easily, trade your Seva coin, and you can go anywhere. This is what we want to do.
You brought up very important points.
Yeah.
Veterans, the amount of service that they'd put in, and then the GI Bill makes total sense. The case with anybody that invests their time to get some sort of a benefit from that, an extrinsic benefit, which is the reward of a Seva coin. Okay, let's ask a couple questions on as we end. There are probably really important pieces. There are definitely really important pieces that we didn't get to. Do you have one that comes to mind that you think we definitely need to address?
Well, I think the important thing, if I haven't said it, is we keep talking about the rewards, but I want to talk about those people, who don't necessarily, they're very lucky in life and they just like to volunteer. I want to encourage them to still do our system because you're doubling your impact. Okay, that's really important. We keep saying, yes, you'll get rewarded, but there are people out there who do it. And these could be churches. This could be religious institutions. They believe that you should just serve for the sake of it. Then I say, please, go ahead and do that. Join our system and double your impact, and then give it to someone else in need, those hours. Yeah.
I think the thing I would want to add is that we need from early on to build this into the educational process. Elementary school kids can make a difference. In my law school, we give a course in system change. We're the only law school that does that. I think we need to build a course of study that every college student takes in understanding systems and understanding how to leverage and change systems by enlisting the people whom the system is designed to help as co-workers and co-producers of outcomes. So I think that we're talking about a radical change in education, but that the digital age makes all that possible. And
well, we have community service requirements now in high schools, even as low to middle schools and colleges, and this is perfect for them because now there's a trail of all the hours that person has put in. Boy Scouts, whatever they do, it can leave a trail. So that person, instead of leaving all your selfies and the crazy things you've done, let's say, instead you have a digital footprint of all the great things you did in life, from starting at age 5, helping out a peer, another 5-year-old. I mean, that is amazing. Wouldn't you rather have that than a drunken photo of you, an embarrassing thing of you? That's what I want people to do. I want to move past the selfie generation and create the next selfless generation. So that's pretty much it.
And the media and video would play a critical role in that, because we need the stories and we need that built into the news, and we need new kinds of local heroes and heroines, and we need to celebrate that. So we're talking about a culture shift that really involves not just doing something that either hurts people or makes money. We need different kinds of headlines. We need to celebrate people who contribute.
Like a huge mover and shaker in the community, one that is giving back a lot in the community, the highest ranking volunteers in the network that are just earning tons of hours, and that they're going and exchanging, they're donating their Seva coins and exchanging them and for services, and they have great stories that we can tell. It's a whole culture shift in media as well.
Or the grandmother in the neighborhood whom everybody knows and counts on.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They can drop their kids off with.
That they can drop their kids off with.
We didn't cover this, but depression. I mean, we actually can, and time banking has proved that, because we're building a community. If somebody's depressed, they have this community out there. They give their time, and it alleviates your own depression because now you're not thinking about your own self.
Oh, and then there's no, the whole money thing also kind of messes up psychiatry a bit. So it can sometimes.
The new studies are showing the impact of social isolation is as dangerous to health as smoking.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's almost a public health issue dealing with isolation.
And there is also a different kind of isolation. There's like the obsession with digitization, and then there's also the obsession with, I guess, when you just get obsessed with one item of knowledge or just knowledge in general, and then you don't socialize as much, which I don't know exactly where that involves with the autism spectrum and stuff, but I don't necessarily think that isolation maybe in its completest form, where you're never talking to anybody, that could be horrible potentially.
We're actually partnering with for autism for children. It's called Pragnya. It's actually one of my good friends who's doing Pragnya. Have you heard of it? Yeah. So, you know, like I said, any nonprofit, any society is ill, they have a nonprofit to help those type of people. Bring them in, have those children give hours to other children, because Pragnya is all about that, helping children socialize with other children who are also on the autism spectrum.
Yes, yes.
So
what does it look like when time is no longer seen as a linear thing?
I don't know, you can answer that. That sounds very theoretical to me.
Well,
I think it's a circle.
I think we're talking about enhancing the qualitative experience of time. We all know that some hours are special and some hours are not. The more we can make hours precious because of the impact they've had and because of the way in which they reinforce our sense of self, I think there's a universal hunger to feel that you matter, that your existence has some significance. And so we change the meaning of time when we enhance it with experience that validates one's own sense of, hey, I'm here for a purpose, and I'm here to find that purpose and to fulfill it. And I'm not alone, and I can find other people who will work with me if I'll work with them.
Okay, and okay, that's so good. So because this leads into one of the questions that we ask on the show a lot on our way out, which is if we think that we're alone in the cosmos. What do you guys think about that?
Is this a religious question?
My guess is that we're not, and that learning how to live with each other is sort of, we may be in some interplanetary, intergalactic school, and we may be in kindergarten learning how to play with each other, and then we may graduate.
I love thinking about it that way too. That's so good.
It's funny, all the answers closest to the truth we chuckle at. That's what I've recently noticed. When people really hit the nail on the head.
Are we actually in an intergalactic kindergarten, and that there are forces outside of
Earth could be a playground.
Earth
it's
could
part
be a
of
playground.
The evolutionary process, and we have to graduate into first grade.
Yeah, exactly. Get into first grade in the first. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that it sounds like you've thought about this. I like it. Oh.
Well, you see, it doesn't frighten me, because then what would higher education look like? And what would, we don't understand yet our own minds, but we do know that in terms of the synaptic connections in the brain, that we have more synaptic connections in the brain than there are stars in the universe. That's a lot of untapped capacity. We don't know about telepathy. We don't know about telekinesis. There's so much we don't know about, just about mind-body. I'm not supposed to be alive. At the age of 44, I had a heart attack in 1980 that blew away 60% of my heart. They gave me 2 years and 2 hours maybe in a day when I would function. And it was in intensive care that I dreamed up time banking. I'm now 83.
Wow.
I had a bar mitzvah 3 years ago, so I'm 83 going on 15, and I'm almost ready to become an adult.
Not yet.
Not yet, but
wow. That is incredible that you lived twice as long after that. Yeah,
almost.
Almost. Wow.
Yeah, I was 44, I'm 83.
Wow. And
so we don't understand mind body.
Yeah.
And yeah, we don't, yeah, that's...
But I'm very clear that that I'm here alive with 85% healed because my spirit, I had a reason to get up in the morning to make a difference.
Yeah.
Or to try and make a difference.
That's it.
That's so awesome. I got that. Just to piggyback on the alone question is if you guys think we're in a simulation.
Is that why it's called? I was wondering.
One of
We're
the
in the
reasons.
Matrix. I believe it.
I want to unpack that more.
No, I was kidding. I don't even want to make a comment on that, honestly.
That's a good answer. Anybody that says that, that's an educated answer right there. No comment.
I choose to think this is the real world.
And we have a question that what do you believe to be true that you believe that less than 1% of society believes to be true?
Why do you ask that question when we're already an hour into the show? What's the most beautiful thing in the world, Edgar? Go with that one and forget the last one. What's the most beautiful thing in the world, Ed?
We do like asking that last one.
Yeah, not on this show.
Our capacity to love each other and trust each other. That's awesome, because it gives birth to all the artistry, to all of our desire to preserve the planet, all of our desire to create the kind of world that will be there for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and enable them to contribute in their way. We are trustees of our ability, of that asset, our ability to love and to care and to learn.
Should ask him what's the secret to living so long, and I think it's that childlike, but let him answer it. It's a secret. We all want to know, like, how do you do it, Edgar? You have so much energy, more energy than I do. I'm half your age, so.
Well, I think my tradition brought me up committed to the pursuit of justice. Justice shall ye pursue. And my father gave me a working definition of what that meant, of what justice meant, and that it was not an end state, that it was the process of preventing or remedying what would arouse our sense of injustice. And what I see is that we do not value human beings, and that we have been corrupted, and our vision has been distorted by allowing money to be the sole way in which we measure value, and that we have to have corrective lenses put on to see the full awesome capacity of human beings. When you think of more neurosynaptic connections than there are stars in the universe, that's pretty awesome. We need to understand how powerful that is. And I think we're here as stewards of that, with a trustee relationship to the earth.
Yeah, and figuring out how to transcend money for honoring human and respecting the human that's a first grader, that's a second grader, that's way past kindergarten. That's even maybe further than that. Wow, that's tough. That's a tough. But everything's possible, and we're gonna get there.
Are you gonna help us?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
With huge mission.
With people like you using media and the internet, we have a new chance for a kind of global awakening.
Yes.
Absolutely. What's been missing often is hope and a sense of possibility. And I think that is now reawakening.
Yeah. Yep.
That's my sense.
Beautiful thing in the world?
I would say innocence in children. Before all the hate and all the other, bickering comes in. That's the most beautiful thing,
there,
innocence.
Yeah. Before all the pressures come
Yeah,
in.
I miss my kids at that age.
Yeah.
So.
Children at that age are just like, ah!
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
They're colorblind.
Yeah.
They're just, everything is love.
Everything's love.
Yeah.
Wow, this has been such a great show. I feel so blessed. This is such a pleasure. Thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you. Anitha, thank you so much.
I'll give you a hug later.
Well, of course, yes. So much to still learn and explore about time banking. Visit the links in the bio. Go and start getting involved with time banking, exploring it, understanding it. And as we move into the era of cryptocurrency and blockchain, this is really going to help us advance the goals that we've set. What can exist outside of the current infrastructure that we live in? What creative new worlds can we manifest and live in? So thank you again for everyone for tuning in. Comment with your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you. Also, don't just consume this, go create, go and make cool things into the world. Go and start with time banking, go and make blogs, make videos, make images, go and create with this. Thank you, Ron, for producing and directing. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you soon. Peace.